Welcome to the North Central Region Water Network's Speed Networking webinar series. The North Central Region Water Network is an extension-led collaboration among land-grant universities in 12 Midwestern states, working to build capacity for effective decision-making on water-related issues. As I said, I'm Rebecca Power, and I'll be your moderator for this webinar. The purpose of the Current is to increase your access to university extension programming across the North Central region, and we hope that it's of use to you, whatever your role in water research, education, or management might be. Our topic today is systems approaches in water and nutrient management education. We're excited to feature the work of the Think Water project, which we also hosted a webinar last February featuring that project before they were refunded by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, so we're going to get an update today. And we are also featuring a project funded by the network to promote more of a systems approach to nutrient management and nutrient management education in the North Central region. Our usual format, for some of you that have attended these before, is 3 10-minute presentations with questions and discussion at the end. Today we have 2 presenters and they will have 15 minutes each, leaving 25 minutes or so for discussion at the end. Jeremy Solon is the Wisconsin Coordinator and National Program Manager of Think Water, and his presentation is entitled Think Water, Integrating Systems Thinking into Water Education, Extension, and Research. And Ann Baird is Program Director at The Ohio State University. Her presentation is titled Mentoring for Early Career Extension Educators, a Systems Approach to Nutrient Management. And a little bit more about Jeremy, who's going to kick us off. As I said, he's the Think Water Coordinator and National Program Manager. He's based at the University of Wisconsin Extension. Previous to Think Water, Jeremy developed and supported K-12 environmental and sustainability programs in the Wisconsin Center for Environmental Education at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. He worked in the sustainability and environmental education field for over 15 years in programs in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Oregon. And he has a PhD in sustainability education, an MS in environmental education, and a bachelor's degree in water resources. So thanks so much, Jeremy, and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for joining us. To get us started and get a sense of who's all here, so I have a little poll I'd like you to complete. Rebecca talked about those little tools in the box to the left, so you can use the poll feature there to respond to this question. There's a and a box there. If you click on that and then select the letter that correlates with the way that you primarily identify, that would be great. Give us some sense of who's here, and I can tailor my presentation just a little bit. All right, so we have some adult and community water educators, a few water stewards, and then some others, a few others, a mix of others. And those I'm guessing are faculty and community organizations in a mix. So good. Thank you for that. I'll be sure to address some of your specific areas of work here. So this is just a quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about for the next 10 to 15 minutes here. Introduce my role just a little bit more, provide a bit of an overview of Think Water and the approach that we're taking to water education, research, and extension, and then also talk about specifically some ways that you might be able to get involved. So, as Rebecca said, I've been with Think Water and specifically I'm the Wisconsin Think Water Coordinator and National Program Manager And I've been in this position for about 6 months now, and it's a really good fit with my background. As Rebecca said, I have a background in water resources and in education, specifically environmental and sustainability education. And so I've come on to ThinkWater specifically and primarily to implement ThinkWater in Wisconsin, or regionally, however we want to think about that, to do two things. One, to serve as a pilot, and also to serve as a model for implementation in other states across the country. So ThinkWater is a national program, but we're going to try a bunch of things out in Wisconsin that I get to help coordinate, and then kind of move out from there. So that's my role, and I'm open to working with anybody who's interested in water education, extension, and research, and trying to partner with folks to see how we can better do that. So moving on to ThinkWater, a little bit of an introduction to this. We like to say that the next big thing in water education, research, and extension isn't water, it's thinking. And we say that for a couple of reasons. One is that there are lots of great programs out there already, and we really look at ThinkWater as kind of a force multiplier, looking at enhancing existing programs and figuring out how we can integrate systems thinking into those programs to enhance what's already happening. And we really believe that ThinkWater, or that thinking, is the key to enhanced education, extension, and research. And really, what ThinkWater brings to other programs is a systems thinking framework that I'll talk more about here coming up. So a little bit of background on ThinkWater. As Rebecca mentioned, there was a session on this last year. We're now actually in the second phase of funding through USDA. But ThinkWater is a national campaign to integrate systems thinking into education, extension, and research, as I've said. The first phase of ThinkWater focused primarily on youth water education. In this phase, which is funded through March of 2019, we are primarily focused on adult and community level programming. Not to say that we won't continue to support youth water education, but we're primarily focused on adult and community level work. Another important part of the ThinkWater approach is our partnership with the Cabrera Research Lab, and that is where the systems thinking framework that we're using is developed, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but the Cabreras are still a core part of what we do. So I want to jump into thinking a little bit. So there are lots of wicked issues out there, incredibly complex issues that are difficult to solve. And we understand that we have these wicked problems because of the difference between how we think real-world systems work and how they actually work. And so the key to this, and this is obviously where we begin to connect in that systems thinking piece, is the thinking. And if we can improve how we think about systems, and better match how we think about them with how they actually work, we think we can begin to solve some of these issues. So to dive into this thinking a little bit more, one of the problems that we run into with a lot of programming and just generally within society, I would say, is that we often equate knowledge with information. And I think we run into this in lots of places, and we kind of intuitively know that this isn't true, but we often think that if we just generate enough information and get information to people, they'll make sense of it and make better choices. And we know that that's not the case. And another way to think about this is the Google search doesn't produce knowledge, it produces information, and a lot of it, but that's not the same as knowledge, right? To build knowledge for decision making, whether those are decisions at the mundane kind of daily level, or trying to tackle wicked problems like we face in the water world, we really need to add thinking into all of that information. So we say that knowledge is information times thinking. And of course, when we're talking about thinking, we're talking specifically about systems thinking. So to dive into that a little bit more, systems thinking is a term I think that we throw around a fair amount. And in my career in education, I've often kind of stumbled on this part of it. I've provided people with information and said, all right, now if you think about this, you'll be able to make some sense of it. Always with this kind of sense that there was some kind of magic that happened there that I wasn't real clear really what that was. And so what the Cabrers have done is really to provide a framework into actually what this thinking process is. And again, I think it's essential that if we're going to solve these wicked problems, that we need to understand how to think about them better. Which is where the framework that we use comes in. So thinking is obviously incredibly complex, but like a lot of complex things, there are simple rules that underlie them. Another example of something that's incredibly complex but underlined by simple rules is biodiversity being really built on a very simple framework of DNA, and the combination of those 4 nucleotides creates incredible complexity and diversity. Right? Same is true with thinking, and these 4 rules, which go by the acronym DSRP, are incredibly powerful and yet simple. In fact, this approach to thinking is being called kind of the underlying or connecting, unifying theory of systems thinking that crosses all of the systems thinking fields. So the 4 simple rules that we use are distinctions, systems, relationships, and perspectives. And we are able to use those in combinations to get at very complex thinking. So distinctions is basically this idea that any one idea or thing is distinguished from something else, which we intuitively do, but to become aware of that process is incredibly important. Systems, of course, that any one thing can be a whole system unto itself. It can be broken down into parts, or it can be lumped into another whole of a system. Relationships, that ideas can be related to other things, and there are lots of relationships that exist. And then perspectives, that everything that we see is viewed from a certain viewpoint. Those viewpoints can change, and that changes how you see things, obviously. So the combination of those simple rules gives us this power of systems thinking. And this is just super simple overview. We have lots more resources to dig into this in more detail. That's kind of just a quick snippet. So I want to, with the rest of the time I have left, talk a little bit about ways to get involved and resources to use from ThinkWater. So we have a host of resources and tools that already exist and that we're continuing to build. We do have some online training currently available that you can access through our website, but we are developing a new course. It'll be about between a 2 and 3 hour course meant to provide a pretty in-depth introduction to systems thinking in a way that can be applied to a whole host of settings, personal and professional settings. That course is being piloted in the next couple of weeks, and then will be available this spring for use for free. So people are interested in getting more into systems thinking, the basic rules that I introduced. That will be a resource that will be available to you. There's a host of additional resources and tools, things like the little handout that I have posted on this slide. We have a host of those that get more into how do you use systems thinking on a daily or professional basis? How do you apply it to organizational development? how do we begin to think about specific issues? So we have a bunch of handouts that are able to do that. We also have systems thinking software program called MetaMapping, which you can access, that actually helps you to map out ideas in an incredibly powerful way. It's a dynamic platform that allows you to kind of map into infinity any idea that you might want to play around with and get a better sense of. So that's available. We're also working on building a community based on this theory called the committed minority, which says that to create change, you need to get those who are passionate about a topic engaged in developing a shared language and understanding and vision for what needs to be done. And so we primarily have that built on social media right now, primarily on Facebook, although we're looking at other platforms to do that. But these are places where anybody who's interested can get engaged with the conversation about how do we apply systems thinking in whatever setting you might work. Then a couple of specific things in Wisconsin. One that we are just launching, the Wisconsin Water Thinkers Network. We'll hold our first gathering March 15th of this year. That will be held in Stevens Point. It'll be an all-day meeting for people involved with water education, extension, research, and any other myriad of interests related to that to come together and to begin to have the critical dialogue around what is effective water education and how can we integrate systems thinking into our programming. That's open to everybody who's interested. So if you're interested, there'll be information on the website, which I'll show you in a little bit. Wisconsin Water School is an idea that we're just beginning to develop with some other partners, thinking about community-level programming and specifically water-related programming for community leaders. We expect that to get implemented in the course of the next year, building off of, to some extent, the Florida Water School, but also looking at some other models. It'll be a train-the-trainer type program. And then we're continuously looking at other partnerships, people, again, who have existing programming, whether that's research or education programming, and want to integrate water or systems thinking into their water-related efforts. We're willing to work with folks to help to do that, kind of on a one-to-one basis. So just to wrap up, the ThinkWater website is up. That's the place where you can access these resources, connect with us to get into more detail on any of these aspects. And again, I guess just to wrap up, I'd say reference again this idea that the next big step I think that we need to take in our water-related programming is the thinking piece and figuring out how we best integrate systems thinking into our programming. So with that, I will turn it over and we'll be able to answer questions at the end of Anne's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And just a quick question from me before we move on to Anne. Do you have links, any of those social media links, places, so if you want people to join you and see where those conversations are, do you have those? And you could, if you do, you could just put them in the chat box for people to take a look at.
Okay. Yeah, I can dump some of those specifically in there. The easiest place is just to go to the website to link with all those. But I can put some of the specific links up.
Great, thanks.
That'd be helpful. Yep, thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and go on to Anne Baird. Anne is currently a program leader at the Ohio State University School of Environment and Natural Resources. Anne designs and coordinates a variety of extension education programs, including the Ohio Certified Volunteer Naturalists and several short courses and workshops addressing sustainable water management. Anne has conducted research on the needs, interests, and knowledge of a variety of audiences, including extension professionals, water managers, and watershed coordinators, using a mental models approach, which she's going to demonstrate for us a little bit on this project today. Ann holds a PhD in Extension Education, a Master's in Science Education, and a Bachelor's degree in Biology. So thank you, Ann, and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca and Jeremy. That was really great start, laying some of the foundations for systems thinking. So I appreciate that presentation, kicking things off. I'm going to describe an actual professional development plan we have designed for promoting a systems approach to nutrient management for early career extension educators. So what exactly will I talk about here today? Well, why a systems approach to nutrient management for this particular group? We'll talk a little bit how we developed this professional development program plan, some key components of the plan, and what's next and how you can get involved or direct people to get involved. So I guess the nutrient management has become, or has been for its inception, a somewhat wicked problem, as Jeremy described. So we think it fits nicely with taking a systems approach. As far as why early career extension educators, well, extension educators play a critical role as farm management change agents, especially where this problem is currently taking place in the Western Lake Erie Basin and throughout the North Central region. Why early career extension educators are a particularly important audience for understanding more about systems thinking and taking a systems approach to nutrient management is because of the retirements currently going on within the ag and natural resources world of extension. We have several new educators throughout our system with less than 10 years experience who will be faced with tackling this problem. So we wanted to learn specifically more about what they know about a systems approach and specifically how they would apply it to nutrient management. So we borrowed a methodology from the field of risk communication. And with this methodology, the goal before you do any outreach or education is to really understand what your target's mental model or web of understanding of a particular risk or difficult issue like nutrient management. So what we did first is create what we're calling our expert model. Throughout the North Central region, we held a group interview with 8 researchers, specialists, and ag and natural program leaders from 3 different states. This was a multidisciplinary panel. We looked to economists and agronomists, extension specialists in manure management and economics, social scientists, as well as engineers. And we asked them simply what they thought early career extension educators should know about a systems approach to nutrient management. We developed a fairly comprehensive model focused around 4 target areas, which I'll talk more about. But we took this model and developed an interview guide and conducted one-on-one interviews with 8 early career extension educators. And we asked them what they knew about a systems approach to nutrient management. Not only what they knew, but also what they wanted to know, what they thought would be important, and how they would like to learn about it. So what did our expert panel have to say about this topic? Well, they thought it would be important for extension educators at this phase in their career to know some basics of systems thinking, as well as how it could be applied to nutrient management. They also thought that it would be important for them to know regionally in the North Central area for extension educators to understand such timely topics such as hypoxia, what some of the past BMPs have been used in the region, and what policies might be applicable, especially for upcoming topics such as climate change. They also thought it would be important for early career educators to know about strategies for reducing nutrient losses using a systems approach, including case studies of extension, outreach, and research going on, such as in nutrient efficiency and farm sustainability. Then the fourth field of the model or major area was effective communication and education that promotes a systems approach. This includes everything from more fundamental things like building trust and working with models to current research on barriers to nutrient management, such as understanding the effectiveness of various approaches and building efficacy within the participants that they can actually make a difference. So each of those four areas we broke down and asked specific questions, open-ended questions of the early career educators about what they knew about these areas. So a really important concept that came about for the experts was extension educators should have an idea of time and spatial scales and how they relate to nutrient management decisions. So thinking about decisions not only at the farm field, but also at the edge of field, the edge of stream, and the watershed scale. For the experts, that was a key component of applying a systems thinking to nutrient management. Some other ideas that the expert had were educators should know more about the full cost of nutrient management decisions, including BMPs, their effectiveness or advantages and disadvantages, especially at various time scales and various places that they would be implemented. Interconnectivity between the best management practices. So how does one best management practice relate to the other, or what would be the upstream and downstream effects of these practices? Again, the range of nutrient inputs, the flow paths and cycles in a watershed, and how do you apply multi-scale solution or suites of best management practices and actually use the landscape or features of the watershed, such as wetlands. Everything I've got highlighted in red were areas, not surprisingly, that weren't necessarily a big part of what the educators were able to talk about with regards to these subjects. So these were more what we would call gap areas, or things we would want to include in a program focused on a system approach to nutrient management. The educators I spoke with had backgrounds in farm management and natural resources, and a few in agronomy. But so the areas in red would be areas in which they knew less about. When asked about what kinds of things, what comes to mind when they think of a systems approach to nutrient management, soil management, soil health, keeping the nutrients on the farm, so decisions at the farm and the fieldscape were certainly more familiar, or areas that they dealt more with and felt more comfortable with. As far as related issues and policies, everything highlighted in red that the expert mentioned, again, were areas less familiar with the early career educators I spoke with. And then finally, on education and communication, the topics that the educators, the experts spoke about and the educators' experience in this area were more familiar. There were less gaps or less areas highlighted in red. Audience research on barriers to adoption, I think that was one gap, especially in terms of the effectiveness of BMPs and how to help farmer audiences understand those. I would consider one gap. And the effectiveness of BMPs at various scales, or the interrelationships between them, would be another gap. So in summary, when you compare how the experts looked at this topic of applying a systems approach to nutrient management and the educators clearly were more focused on farm and field in terms of the systems that they had experience with. They had less experience with the regional issues or case studies using a system approach. and the various inputs and cycles of nutrients throughout the watershed. They weren't thinking about suites of BMPs necessarily, or the effectiveness of BMPs or the full cost. When we asked the educators what they needed or wanted in terms of this topic, clearly a firmer definition of a systems approach. It was really important to them to understand what other educators were doing either in their state or the region with regards to taking this approach, especially those that were working with different audiences. So some of our educators who were working with more with a natural resources audience were really interested in what those were working with primarily ag audiences. They were interested in specific practices and their effectiveness. Strip till was mentioned specifically, as well as regulations in their area related to nutrient management. Again, keep in mind that the educators I spoke with or interviewed had on average 2 to 3 years experiences. So these were the type of questions they were getting in this area. The educators who are working primarily with environmental groups and lay audiences definitely wanted to better understanding the nutrient management decisions of farmers, because they almost saw themselves as facilitators to what's often a contentious area between ag and non-ag audiences of nutrient management. The educators were definitely interested in the benefits of plants for uptakes of various nutrients and wanted to be more familiar with that. When asked how they would want to learn about these topics, what I really would flag and feel like was an important piece of this is how important peer learning was. So they described the importance of learning from their peers and learning from extension specialists or educators with a bit more experience. They were definitely interested with webinars, especially combined with extension professional meetings. They liked the idea of looking at this topic as a region and taking even potential tours to see how it was working. What are the goals? So finally, at the end, the second meeting after the interviews, we got our expert panel as well as our early career educators together, and what started out of the idea of a mentoring program, once we got the conversation rolling between these two groups, really developed into a joint learning network where mentoring would arise organically versus being preordained. Some of the goals of this network, which were simply to develop a more sophisticated understanding of a systems approach to nutrient management, as well as understand the relative scale of this problem in the region and what types of strategies could follow or be used taking this systems approach. An idea that they worked on together was just simply to perhaps host one of the webinars as a farm forensics one, where they looked together at extreme problems, either where edge of field water quality studies indicate that farm is doing really well. They wanted to backtrack and look at what is that farming system that's leading to that great data, or if the edge of field water quality data suggests it's not doing well, what's the farm system leading to that? That's an activity they talked about taking with this learning community. What's the significance of, I think, our program plan needs assessment? I think the model and the gaps can help us decide what to include when designing nutrient management education. I think the learning community approach has some really neat benefits for new educators in that they can help to navigate the sometimes controversial world of nutrient management education and find out where their role or niche is. That can be a difficult area for new educators, especially those that are used to more of a natural resources audiences. There's lots of professional groups that deal with agricultural and nutrients, and they need to know where they fit in, how they can speak professional, and have a group that they can bounce ideas off. I think the regional network approach will allow us to share information like the water quality data to create a more robust understanding of this issue. What's next? We're going to continue our regional mentoring calls quarterly in 2016. We'd like to recruit some additional experts and early career educators and allow educators an opportunity at these calls to share ideas and difficulties they're having with promoting a systems approach to nutrient management.
So I had a question. Jeremy, could you tell us a little bit more about the water school model that you spoke of? So there are a number of different water-related, I know Extension has provided leadership for a lot of watershed education programs. So I'm wondering who the audiences are for that model, the topics, the format, etc., so we can help figure out where something like that might integrate with existing water education programs across the region.
Yeah. It's definitely kind of an early stage idea, so I can share kind of what some of the conversations have been, but it may shift. So generally what we're thinking about at this point is kind of a train-the-trainer model where we provide training for extension folks, community organizations, whoever might be providing might have an interest in providing water programming at the community level. Provide them with obviously systems thinking background and connection with some other resources, and then they'd be able to deliver programs locally. And the audience that we've primarily been thinking about is kind of a community leader audience, so local decision makers, government officials, active citizens. And that is the Florida Extension model as well at this point. So that's generally what we're thinking. I've specifically had some conversations with the Wisconsin Lakes program, potentially having some of their folks engaged, some of their kind of lake leaders engaged in that as kind of the next step for them. So there's another, it might go in that direction and be kind of an audience or user group focused program as well. So those are a couple of ideas that we have at this point.
Great, that's helpful. And I noticed that Ann Lewandowski is on the phone here, or on the webinar. She leads a water, and I think Les Everett here, Ann leads a water, a training program for water resource professionals. I think Lois Wolfson's on. She has a similar role for a program in Michigan, and Joe Bunnell, and I know Ann Beard, you've been involved in this as well at the Ohio State Watershed Academy, and I don't see anyone from Indiana's Watershed Leadership Academy, but there's some, you may have seen those, but it just might be interesting to have some conversation among those groups, among your, with the Think Water Project and those groups, some cross-fertilization there.
Yeah, that'd be excellent. I'd love to do that.
So Lois or Ann, or anyone, feel free to chime in if you have anything to add. Okay. Oh, here Eugene says the academy. I wonder which academy, which state is in session today and tomorrow with a new group. So thanks for that. Oh, thank you, Indiana Watershed Leadership Academy. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay. So Ann, I have another question for you. How do we get involved? How do we, if we're interested in participating in one of the opportunities that you talked about? I'm going to go back to your slide here. Either these mentoring calls or sharing and ideas or programs that do take a systems approach, how can we do that?
Yeah, the best way, Rebecca, would just be to email me, and I'll add you to our list of participants. We'll just be using a pretty easy method of meeting by webinar call throughout the year. So I don't think it'll be a lot of time-consuming effort, and we'll get the agenda out to folks ahead of time. So the Baird.41 is the best way to join those mentoring calls on nutrient management, taking a systems approach.
I'm just going to point out that we have a number of selections set up for the upcoming months. The 2016 calendar year is getting scheduled out, and we invite you to join in upcoming sessions or to share the word on any sessions that you think might be of interest to colleagues. I would remind you that this session is being recorded and will be available on the website that's listed at the bottom of the screen there. Those are usually available in about a week. Please feel free to contact any of either Ann or Jeremy if you have interest in their work, and there's their emails again. And otherwise, we look forward to May 20th is not the right date. Okay, well, there is one in May. They're always the third Wednesday of the month. So we'll check those dates and make sure. But otherwise, we look forward to having you join us at future sessions. And thank you for joining us today.